Thank you, Ellen. Appreciate that. And we are thrilled to be here with you all. And as we go through this, essentially one of the reasons we really wanted to be able to do this is to offer the possibility of us enhancing possibly what is one of the most important skills you can ever have within a JCC, no matter where you are within the JCC.
Yeah, we're going to try to frame it around the whole idea of supervision management and the Tomcat, which we'll come to at the end, talent management more specifically, since all the J's are really getting excited about our minimum. We've started the process, others will want to join, but we're going to hopefully have some fun for 45 minutes. And feel free to type in and ask questions because we want to make this interactive. We have some thoughts, places for you to be interactive, but let's just have a good time for 45 minutes on this, almost the last day of April.
Yeah,
It's
wow.
rainy and cloudy here in Jersey.
I know. So if the rest of you are having some warm, sunny weather, please send it our way.
Yes, we're jealous.
And so why did we talk about this whole idea of Connect to Succeed? Well, we really decided to build it on some of the the research that came out of the Tomcats. So this was over 300 Tomcats that have been delivered back to the JCCA. And these are the top 5 characteristics that JCCs across the country said they needed to develop. And if you look at this between, everything from fundraising to relationship building to supervision to staff management, all of these have one thing in common. And that is, if you are really able to build positive relationships, all of those will actually come out better. All of those will actually develop into, greater awarenesses. Yes.
For those of us that are seriously older, what's a little bit surprising to me is that having been involved in this world of leadership training and management development, that many years ago, this was where it was at, positive relationships. And I don't know, somehow I guess we got away from it. But when you look at all the leadership trends that are floating around out there right now, and there's some really fabulous stuff, so much of it is the foundation of it is how do we create strong relationships? So it's funny, I guess that old saying that everything old is new again is really true when it comes to leadership. And this is why we really feel this focus this afternoon is really important. So for those of you that think, oh my God, relationship building, I think there's this cool Olympian out of Canada, which is where we would like to go one of these days.
Yes.
For all of our friends in Vancouver or Banff or Toronto or Montreal, all those places. It's the notion, the aggregate of 1%. If we could just learn something new every day, and we put that all together, it adds up to us being exceptional at what we do. So, if today you can find 1% of this, you go, my gosh, if I do that a little bit differently, I'm going to be exceptional, and I think we will have all done our jobs.
Dr. Greg Wells.
Dr. Greg Wells.
1%.
Yeah.
And so, what's this whole idea? Building positive relationships. What is this really about? Well, there's a couple of things that are part of it. People who build the best relationships, they have a genuine interest in the other person. I don't know about you, but it always amazes me anymore when I'm in a conversation with somebody and they feel like they've left the room. They're no longer there. And having that genuine interest is something that conveys a tremendous amount of respect and caring for the other person. And that falls out into all sorts of connections that lead back to better JCCs, that lead back to better relationships, that lead back to ultimately also even better performance in the workplace.
Secondly, individuals like this, and this is kind of fascinating given our time, they create a strong emotional connection with individuals to develop these relationships. And I think we're all, a lot of us, I suspect, familiar with all this work around the fact that now that we're using a lot of devices, empathy is becoming less and less easy for many people to sort of process. And we're getting away from the idea of what does it like to create emotional connections. So again, this is something that we've been doing a lot of work on research on millennials, Scott and I, and Gen Z and Gen Y, and a lot of how to leaders manage these individuals. So this whole idea of how do we create empathy, and we're going to come back to that in a few minutes around what some of the work Apple's doing, but this is important, and we're getting away from this. So this is really, really something we have to think about.
Another part of people who have the best relationships, they are very aware. I think sometimes it's easy for us to be aware of others' communication style. One of the challenges I would make to all of us on this call is how aware are we of our own communication style, what we're doing at a specific moment. Very, very quick example. Jan and I were one time talking to a senior leader who every, I would say, 10 seconds kept pulling out his phone to look at his phone. And finally, we even said, if this is not a good time. And he said, well, why? What do you mean? He was not even aware he was pulling out his phone every 10 seconds and looking at it. And so that whole idea of, are we actually aware of what we are doing in a communication moment? And then finally,
our favorite, that we have to communicate. We have to think about communicating in a manner that connects with others, and we're going to talk about how to do that, because it isn't just about us anymore. It's really about the other person, and looking for opportunities to figure out what is it they're trying to say, how are they saying it, and how do we speak with them that allows them to know we really have connected and that we genuinely care about them.
And so it'd really be easy, but it would be malpractice for us to simply say to everybody, okay, have better relationships. What we'd like to do is offer you a strategy, a 4-step strategy to keep in mind anytime that you are meeting with staff, that you are meeting even with members. So this is a strategy that can be used in multiple places. Fundraisers, yeah, because fundraising was one of the areas of the Tomcat. This can be used in multiple ways. So here's the 4-step strategy that we came up with. We call it the HEAR strategy. HEAR, hesitate, evaluate, attend, respond. And by the way, the Zoom is helpful because I can actually see some people writing some of this down. So I'll make sure you have enough time to jot it down.
But we'll put this, we'll send this out when we're done, right?
Yes.
It'll be on the intranet.
We'll make sure you can get it. And so what we'd like to do is we want to take a walk through each of these and show how they can be used in a JCC. And this strategy in itself can be used in a single conversation, can be parsed out, can be used in multiple ways. And so let's start talking about that first one, the whole concept. And we believe that we really need to start with hesitating.
We do. So I think we have a definition. This is the trick here. This is active listening. It's not passive listening. So if you think about it, we're about to do an exercise. It's the way that we reflect back what the other person has expressed to let them know you're listening, to check in with their understanding his or her meaning. This is not about us. This is about us participating in a two-way event where we're really paying attention to what the other person is saying.
And one of the analogies that I always like to use, especially in hesitate, and this is something to keep in mind in terms of any kind of relationships. If you really want to build a relationship better and you're in the midst of the connection with the other person, ask yourself the question, where's the spotlight? If the spotlight is on you, shift it to the other person. They will appreciate that much more than you ever know, because if you think about your own day, and I think about mine, how often during the day we never get the spotlight focused on us. People focus it on themselves. And so under hesitate, the whole idea of where's the spotlight needs to be on the other person. So what are some of the parts of active listening? Well, some of them are fairly obvious. This whole idea of being able to really be present with the other person.
So here's what we want you to do. I think, if I'm correct, Ellen and others, that you can actually type in some responses, please. And here's the question, and this is why it's a little more challenging. It's, what behavioral strategies will you employ to develop or deepen your active listening skills? And this is behavioral, and when Scott and I talk about this whole thing of listening, we can all say, I'm going to put away my device. The question is, are you really going to put away your device? It's easy to say, it's not so easy to do. So we need a behavioral strategy that will remind you the device needs to go away if that's one of your skills. So we're going to give you a couple minutes. We can see some of you, so we're watching. And we'd like you to type, because I think you can, right, Scott?
You can. I think you can. Ellen, they can type responses into...
you can type responses into the group chat.
Excellent. So we're going to have a group chat with all 200 of us or so. And we would like you to come up with behavioral strategies to develop or deepen our active listening skills. This is the key. So we can hum, but we won't.
No, we're not going to.
So we're going to need a couple minutes, and if people will start typing, I don't know where we're going to see it, but we'll see what happens here. And we have some friends out there that might join in the fun here.
So
Scott's going to do something here to see if you can see whatever is happening.
And actually, Ellen, I might need to employ you to kind of read off what some people are saying in the chat?
Yeah, this is your.
So I'll just read them off as they're coming in.
Great,
Okay.
excellent, thank you.
Okay. This is from Walt. Look at the person, periodically summarize your understanding of what the person is saying. This is from Denise Wolf. Ask lots of questions. Walt, again, don't interrupt the speaker. Kim, sit away from the computer.
Step away.
Yeah,
Step way away.
Jane Pasternak, eye contact and body language. Walt, again, don't equate an experience you've had to one they have conveyed, especially if they're emotionally sensitive. This is just from the Miles Nadell team. Look into a person's eyes. Another, Caitlin wrote eye contact. Lehigh Valley, eye contact.
Wow.
Denise, adjust body language to be positive. What else? Caitlin, knowing how much time each person has for the meeting or conversation.
Yeah.
Sandy Newman, repeat what has been said.
Wow.
Mhm.
Should I keep going?
No, I think, first of all, I'm curious, where's the Miles Nadal, Jay?
I believe in Toronto.
Oh,
Cool.
cool. Clearly, we all have a lot of strategies. The question becomes, how do we remind ourselves and others to actually employ them? What can we do to help those people we're managing or that we're working with to develop their active listening skills? It's clear to me we have a lot of people on this call that know exactly how it works. The question is, what do we do to teach others so that we now have a listening environment? Thoughts?
You want them to type that in?
Oh, shoot us
What
a
do
few
we-
answers.
Yeah, just a few answers. What do we
It's
do?
more fun if you do
It's
some of
almost
the
like,
work.
what do we do to create an environment where that will happen? So at your JCC, what can you do to make sure that there is more hesitation?
Listening environment.
That it's not just people talking at people.
So some of the answers that have come in are lead by example. That's from Miles Nadell.
Yep.
Sandy Newman, that's Allentown, Lehigh Valley. Get out of your office.
There's a good one.
Walt wrote a muzzle.
Of course you did.
Yeah.
Ann Goldstein, don't answer the desk phone, model active listening and be a coach to your staff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that whole thing of modeling is so important. It's so difficult, right? It's easy to talk over and interrupt. So, Sonia will practice good listening skills as we do the rest of this webinar.
And one of the other pieces to remember, and this is something that it is becoming more and more important. I was recently down at the University of Pennsylvania in a class, and they brought this up yet again, and there is more research on it, and that is, if there is even a cell phone visible, the depth of the conversation will not go to a significant level because everybody in the room somehow believes that with the cell phone visible, what's going to come through on the cell phone is more important than what's happening in the room. So even something as simple as that, in terms of hesitation, sends a powerful signal to the people with whom you're speaking that they are the most important thing in the room at that moment and nothing else is. And so something of that to keep in mind in terms of behavioral skills, even setting up a room, setting up an environment for listening within a space. But really what it comes down to is the personal, and you have to ask yourself the question, am I fully present in the moment? I do want to comment on one thing. A number of you mentioned eye contact. Sometimes it's important to take that to the next level because I don't know about you, but maybe I learned this in school. I can stare at people and not be present, and it looks like I'm maintaining eye contact.
That's so gross.
It's horrible, but it's true. But here's a way to check. What's their eye color? Ask yourself the question: is
Careful.
do you know what color their eyes are?
Careful, we're not staring into their eye.
True, but if you look, if you're looking at somebody in the eye. So anyway, why do we think this is important? Well, you're not alone in this, and we just want to give you two very quick, fairly prominent examples of people who You might think, oh, they shouldn't have to listen anymore, and yet they think it's fairly incredibly important. But to sum this up,
before we do, let's stop talking, start listening. And our favorite phrase, by the way, is always. And people mentioned like ask good questions and eye contact and all the things we do, and which allow us to be curious, not certain, to know everything. And by the way, if you need more information on that cell phone thing, we require all our classes now. People get their cell phones off the table. MIT, Sherry Turkell is doing the research on cell phones on the table. All right.
And so in terms of other people who talk about this whole idea of hesitating, in other words, you not being the focus of attention, we want to add two. So I'll talk about the first one. Had the privilege to work with them, with Microsoft for a while, and Satya Nadella is the new CEO of Microsoft. And in a recent interview, they were asking him how he's known for his ability to connect with people and to make decisions. And they said, well, how are you in meetings? He said, I have 3 strategies. Listen more, talk less, and be decisive. And so his point is, he says, people aren't going to speak up when I'm in the room if I'm the one who speaks first. In order for them to truly feel heard, I have to, and he even used the word in the interview, he said, I have to hesitate and allow them to speak first. And so especially for those of you who run meetings, where you're trying to get everybody involved, Satya Nadella's strategy is a very, very powerful one.
And I don't know if anybody's, I think it was earlier this week on CBS This Morning, Angela Earhart was hired from Burberry and she's redesigning all the Apple stores. If you've been in New York City and you go to the Oculus, their new Apple store design is pretty fabulous and quite interesting. And she was asked, why did she think she was hired? Because Tim Cook went after her hard because she was so good at motivating, et cetera. And she said that actually one of the best ways she thinks to motivate people is you have to connect with them, and you have to care, and you have to do what you say you're going to do. When you're empathetic, you're putting yourself in other people's shoes. It's not about you. And I sort of love this. There are 7 billion people on the planet, and it's not about you. I think when you're empathetic to someone, they open up to you. They don't get defensive. And when they open up to you, you're both open, and then you can dream, and then you can come up with incredible things together. And this whole idea, I thought it really struck me as someone who doesn't always like to be in the spotlight. I know it's hard to believe, but there's 7 billion people out there, and it's not about us. It's about them. So this ability to really step back, to listen, to be curious, not certain, to do all those things that you mentioned that allow us to be great listeners is the key that helps us build the rest of the steps around Connect to Succeed.
And I want to emphasize something Jan just said as we summarize hesitate. And that is, very often we think it's about listening or it's about not speaking. But to put it in the positive light, what Jan just said, we have found is one of the best ways we have learned to hesitate. And that is, if we enter any communication, any relationship with curiosity, what are the things I would love to know about this individual or this situation or whatever? So begin to craft for yourself, what are some of your best questions? Because those are some of your most powerful elements in terms of hesitating. And if you come to a relationship curious, but not with certainty that you already know the answer, you will find that hesitating is not difficult at all.
Or even if you think you know the answers, there are many situations where you ask again because you never know what you're going to discover.
So once you hesitate and you've asked these questions, you hear some answers. And so then the next step is this whole idea of evaluating. And what are we talking about when we're talking about evaluating? This is where you connect facts and data with the underlying emotion to create the greater connection and stronger relationship. So really what you're looking at is, what do you have? That should say greater connection, not greater connection.
Greater connection, yes. Well, this part I sort of love. This whole thing about what happens to the brain. The brain is an amazing thing that we really need to think about. And that whole brain, in terms of how it works, I want everybody to think about the fact, if you're in the hallway and your exec walks up and says to you, I need to speak to you in my office, what do you immediately think?
Well, that would be fun. Oh, you know what? Just quickly, type those answers in. That'll be a lot of fun. So what goes through your brain when your exec says, I need to speak to you, see you in my office? All right. And Ellen, do we have some of those answers?
Yes. Uh-oh, you did something wrong. What did I do? Yikes.
Isn't that the truth?
I love that. And there is a reason for that. They're actually.
Here's a good one. He has another wacky idea.
We won't say who said that.
Yeah, we won't ask. We won't ask who wrote that in. Ellen knows, but she'll keep it secret.
Yeah.
One of the reasons we bring this up, and this is why it's so critical for relationships, is anytime you are engaged in a conversation, when you immediately begin a dialogue with somebody else, the emotional part of your brain works.
Anyone want to guess how many times faster than the logical part of the brain? Some of you should know this because I think we've probably mentioned this at a class or two, and we see some familiar faces.
That's true.
So we have twice as fast. That's the 20 times.
Oh, people, come on. Guess again and raise that number. How about
100 times.
Well, we'll try it.
Yeah, we're getting up there. The emotional part of the brain works approximately 80,000 times faster than the logical part of the brain. So anytime you have an interaction with somebody, what happens first is you've got a gut reaction before the logical part of the brain engages. And that's really important to remember. So, when any of you have those, we call them, well, in our business, we call them those wince clients. None of you, by the way. But some of those clients who call on the phone and we'll see the number and we think, oh no, that's the emotional part of the brain reacting. The trigger went off. You all have those. Might have members. You might have staff members that have been challenged before. Or you see some people in the hallway that you like. And it's an immediate, because even before the logical part of the brain gets in. So in terms of evaluating, we've got this opportunity. We've asked questions. We're getting data. What do we do with this before we let the emotional part of our brain run wild? Let's take a look at this.
I sort of love this part, actually. This is why I think this whole notion, and many of you had great strategies on how do we hesitate. Because in anything, fundraising, negotiating, difficult conversations, building a positive relationship, we all are able to see the top of this iceberg thingy here, where there's a little bit showing on this beautiful picture that Scott discovered, and those are the facts and data. Facts and data, they sit above the line, easy to learn and discover. It gives us the opportunity to find places that we agree, to figure out how we're going to ask for those funds, or we're going to have this tough conversation and do a good negotiation. Easy, that's the easy part. Then there's the part that starts to come just below the brain.
And so, yeah, and below that waterline is the emotion. What's the emotion that is going on here? What am I feeling? Am I feeling anger? Am I feeling happy? Am I feeling, am I feeling put out? So what is the emotion?
How would they feel?
Right. And how is the other person feeling? What emotions am I sensing from them? What are they going through? They're talking about a really difficult time at the JCC. Can I empathize and say, wow, I can really hear where that's coming from? So part of the evaluation is separating the facts and data from the emotion, because sometimes what comes out, we react to the emotion, but what are the facts and data? And then there's one final piece that the Harvard Negotiation Project identified, and it's the deepest level down, and that in all of our conversations, what happens is that we reveal some part of our identity. And so that identity might be, I'm a person that wants to be perfect, or not me, right? Yeah, not me.
Yes, you. Yes, you.
But as we reveal part of our identity, it might be that I want to be thought of as a person that connects well with others, or I want to be thought of as a funny guy, or I want to be. All of those are connected to identity. And what Harvard discovered is the more we can kind of really parse out, what's their identity in all this? It helps us make connections. So the second step of evaluation is, once you're hearing from the person, separating the facts and data from the emotion, from the identity, because the most important piece is this gives you a chance, when you finally can respond, of connecting with the other person.
Yeah, I have an interesting example of how this works. Many of you know, we own a small independent bookstore. We have college kids. We have high school kids that we mentor. And I'm looking for full-time employment for the summer for some of them, and I happened to bump into a woman who runs a beach program for kids over the weekend, and I thought I need to figure out how to connect with her. I didn't know her very well, and I wanted to see if I could find a way to sort of weasel my little kiddos into some of her programs. And so as I was dialoguing with her, she started telling me about, she has daughters who have scholarships, who worked hard to go to college. And I started thinking about it. She had a lot of emotion around her children worked really hard to get where they got, because they come from a lower income family, so they had to work, on and on about, she was so proud of these girls and how hard they worked. And so I started thinking about how I would respond to ask for what I would like to help my kiddos get summer jobs. So think about it, facts and data. She was telling me she has lots of applications for these programs. I'm thinking, I get that part. I got to figure this out. But as I started listening to her talk about the emotion around pride and work and hard work, I started thinking about my kiddos, how hard they work and how proud we are of them. So I could start to connect with her on that level. And this whole notion of identity in terms of what her feelings are about helping them be successful in life. And that is really important to her and all these children in this community that we live in. We have a lot of lower income kids. And I started thinking about that around me. So we were able to really start to make a connection. So I moved from where do I turn in the application to, then she said to me, well, why don't you just come and see, why don't you let them know that you're here? And then she said, why don't you bring them over so that I can meet this kiddo? So I felt like what I had done was really pay attention to not just the facts and data, but what was going on for her to make a connection. So this really is ask good questions and think about, where is this person coming from? And her triggers are hard work, proud, having initiative to find money and get out and get jobs. And if we just had a cursory conversation, I probably would have known, all I would have known is they get a lot of applications for summer work and my kiddos would probably not be there.
Yeah. So really, once you get beyond this, it comes down to, so what are some of these strategies to evaluate? And so this first one, this whole idea of listen and clarify what are the most important relevant facts. And this one's really important. Too often what happens to a lot of us is we don't separate what are facts and what are judgments. So let me give you a very quick example. We were recently at a nonprofit in New York. We do an eight session, 2.5-month program for them for their middle managers. And one of the pieces was to really get to this whole idea of what's facts, what's really the data. And so we simply had them evaluate me. And we had them make statements about, well, Jan wanted it to be about me because she didn't want it to be about her, so it had to be me. But we had to make statements about what they would say about the work that I did. And what we identified was almost 95% of what they stated were not facts. They weren't, Scott does this, Scott does that. They were judgments. Scott is, Scott is, I'm trying to remember.
Happy.
Scott is athletic. We were all like, how do you know that? What's the data? Well, it's he moves in a certain way, but they weren't identifying the facts. They were saying the behaviors, they were making judgments. And so I would say to all of you out there, just be aware of when you're looking at and when you're listening to what you're trying to evaluate, are you in your own mind making judgments, or are you just looking at the data? That's one of the keys in terms of evaluating facts and separating it from judgment. The second piece in strategy, be aware of what you're experiencing from the other person. When all of us were about 3 years old, we were masters at this. We had the ability to really suss out what the emotional state of someone was. And we've learned by going to school to kind of ignore that. But most of us have very good gut reactions as to where someone is. And so if you get a feeling of, wow, I'm getting a sense that Jan is anxious. Again, part of evaluation is I might want to take some follow-up questions or take a step to say, I'm kind of sensing this. You know, what's going on for you right now?
Of course, my favorite topic is there's a lot of gender research around experiencing from others. So there is some interesting studies out there that women do slightly better at experiencing and understanding, knowing what's going on for other people. So if on the big bell curve, depending on where you fall, male or female, sometimes you might want to check in with somebody else, because there are times when, many of you know, Scott and I do a lot of work together, that, you know, I'll say, wow, I noticed that so-and-so is a little down, and thought it might be, really, I'm not sure I noticed that. So we can help each other out sometimes if we don't think that we are as good as experiencing. Or as I look at some of the research around some of our other generations, empathy is not as high on their list as it is for maybe some of us older people. So mentoring, sponsoring, coaching, this might be an example when we're coaching around the Tomcat Talent Management, we might have to help people start to understand what is it to know when people have different emotions, etc.
Right. That's brilliant, Kat.
Oh, thank you, Scott.
You're welcome. And of course, we already mentioned this whole idea of separating facts and data from emotion and identity, because, and the final piece is, what you learn to focus on, you use what you learn from their conversation with this individual from evaluating to focus on what matters. In Jan's conversation with Yvonne, she was able to identify with Yvonne that her kids working hard really mattered to her. It was part of her identity as a mom. She was able to connect with that, and actually, in that case, influence Yvonne to help her out. And so this is the key behind evaluate. It's you're identifying what matters to the other person. They're much, much more likely to connect with you when you do. So we've talked about the whole idea of hesitating it and evaluating, but what's next?
Our favorite slide in the whole entire session.
So we talk about attend, and that is because nonverbal communication is so powerful. So very quick question, because Jan believes that everybody in the world knows this statistic. Could you please just type in what percentage of communication is nonverbal? And that is in the tone and the body language.
Come on, people. We got people out there that know this. There should be people that we know that you know.
Okay. 80, 90, 75, 65.
Right.
Whoa, it's flying in. A lot of 85 and 95.
Excellent. I knew you knew the answer to this. It's actually a 93.
Yeah, it's 93. So those who are hitting 95, you were good. Okay. Jan, I'm sorry. A lot of people knew that. I'm glad. But think about that. So 93, and actually is between 93 and 95% is nonverbal. And yet, what happens? We're in a world now that all we do is text. And you can't read nonverbal communication on a text. And so the whole idea of attending is when you have the opportunity to be in front of an individual, is to ask yourself the question, what am I discovering from their nonverbals? What am I discovering from their gestures, how they're seated? Or even if you have someone on the phone, ask yourself, what am I hearing from the tone of their voice? Because very often tone can be very, very powerful.
I know, these Zoom calls where we get to look at each other, I'm not sure. So on this next slide, we have a little extra something for you to do. We want you to take a look at this slide. And the first thing we want you to focus on is this fine gentleman. And we want you to type in, what are the nonverbals you're experiencing from this person?
So as you see him,
first thoughts.
what do you think? What's he going through? Maybe what's he is
You're leading
experiencing?
the witness. You're leading the witness.
I'm trying to help.
Okay. So we have listen to me, disagreement or resistance, defensive, looks perplexed, another defensive, engaged,
That's interesting.
defensive position.
Right. Isn't that interesting? That man hasn't said a word to us. And we have all sorts of thoughts about, I didn't hear anything positive. Kind of funny.
I heard one. Somebody
Good.
said,
Oh, we got another one. Good eye contact. Hand gestures are strong in making a point, trying to be helpful.
Fascinating when you think about what we're hearing is, some of us see the defensive posture, which I can see.
I can see. Yeah.
So what do we think when we look at her?
Yeah, type in what you think when you look at her posture.
Well, not just
Or her nonverbal.
Thank
Sorry.
you.
Thank you.
Stop leading the witness. You're not the lawyer.
Excited about what he's talking about.
Okay.
Explaining information, leaning forward, active listening.
Yeah, I love her.
Listening, attentive listener.
Mm-hmm.
What might we ask him to do differently if we were coaching him and we were wanting him to maybe, I have to say I sort of like his open facial expressions, but if we wanted him to, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this so that I get to where I want to go. How might you coach him to do this a little bit differently if in fact we think he's being defensive, etc., right, and he's trying to convince this, maybe it's her boss, we don't know, about a particular point. What could he do differently to change that nonverbal picture?
I'm defensive.
So some of the answers are turn his body toward her.
Good.
Sit back in the chair. Put the hand down.
Excellent.
Lean back. I guess that's, sitting in the chair.
Right.
Take the table away and sit facing each other.
Yeah, it's hard to tell whether they're cattywampus or next door. I love some of those suggestions, but just think about as supervisors and managers, and our job is to coach people to be better at. And this might be an appropriate posture for this situation. We don't know. But again, thinking about how do I change up the nonverbals if in fact I'm trying to do something else. Maybe this, I'm not going anywhere with this and I need to change. I'm projecting defensiveness. I don't want to. So being able to help our supervisees, our colleagues, people we supervise on their nonverbal behavior. And all we're saying is if this person changes just a little bit, it changes the whole picture for us. So,
and again, even in terms of connection, one of the things we talk about in Attend is that we not only want you to attend to the other person's nonverbals, but yours. How do you appear in a meeting? How do you appear when you're speaking to somebody else? So one of the tips, even in terms of this, I'm going to pick up from his body language, just to be aware, especially for supervisors, because you might find you get yourself caught in this. Notice the pen he's holding. In cases like this, especially if he gets a little bit defensive, that pen can actually be seen as a weapon. And so one of the things for supervisors is if you're dialoguing with one of your staff members and it's not that easy of a conversation, unless you are taking notes, put the pen down. So it's just something so being aware of our own nonverbals. How do you sit? Are you turned away from people when they're speaking to you?
A smile would be really different.
A smile in either of them, a really good smile would be very, very powerful. And so in terms of attending, this whole idea of nonverbal communication, what do you do in terms of this model? A couple of things to keep in mind. We call it congruity. Do you see the 3 V's working together? And the V's are visual, verbal, vocal. In other words, if what I'm saying, oh, Jan, it's good to see you, and I'm smiling, and my gestures, so visual, verbal, you hear my tone, visual, verbal, what I'm saying. Visually, I show it to you by my body language, and vocal is the tone. If those 3 V's connect, you absolutely know you're hearing truth. You can almost be very sure of what you're hearing. When there's a disconnect, and all of us have seen this, when you see somebody in front of a room and they say, I'm very happy to be here today. You don't believe that. Why not? Because there's no congruity. And so the whole idea of attend becomes extremely powerful because you're looking for more data around how you are connecting with that other individual.
We talked about number 2, be aware of your own body language. And if you take a look at this little cartoon, one of the things we like is there's a lot of positive words in those bubbles But as we looked at this little cartoon figure, it didn't feel positive to us at all. So the body language for us did not match the particular bubbles in those actions. And number 3, which some of us probably are aware of, and we've never been big fans of, but we've seen some really interesting studies of late, is that whole NLP, mirroring, neuro-linguistic programming. There's a lot of interesting studies right now. We do love Betty Davis and Joan Crawford, I think, that in fact we can diffuse difficult conversations through mirroring, and then we can create influence through mirroring. So we like to say, use it wisely. There's a lot of work out there you can go and read about, and it's something that, while we don't love it, we know, at least the studies indicate as of late, that it's something we should all think about, and it fits into attending to your nonverbal behavior.
Right.
It feels manipulative to us, but apparently
It works. And so to summarize attend is being aware of one more, I'm going to call it a data source. If you really, really want to make a connection within a relationship, it's not just the words that people are saying, but it's being able to connect and watch their nonverbals and ask yourself the question, is what they're saying really kind of connected to their body language? Do I really feel there's something here? Or do I need to ask, do I need to be more curious? Mm-hmm. It's not that you're making a decision, oh, they're lying. All we're simply saying under attend is, if there's not congruity, just be a little bit more curious. And that can make the connection. Because sometimes people might say, wow, yeah, you're right, I am a little uncomfortable. And boy, you've now just taken the connection to a whole deeper level. And that's exactly what this is all about.
That's what the lady from Apple said, put yourself in their shoes, keep asking questions, and they'll
That's
open
right.
up.
So we touched on hesitate, evaluate, attend, then went finally, it is your opportunity to respond, the HERE model. How do you do that in a way that fully connects? Well, the whole idea of responding is making sure that there are those connections between the bubbles, that what you're saying is heard by the other person. And so we just have a few suggestions on how to do that.
After we have our wonderful little cartoon. For us dog and cat lovers out there, the tendency to talk past one another, which is common sometimes in the hallways. So let's talk just briefly, because I can't get over how time is flying. It's pretty amazing. So in order to respond in compatible language, clearly we had to have hesitated, evaluated, and attended. And some strategies we can use are...
Well, and I'm going to stay on this one just for 1 second. So when we say respond in a compatible language, a lot of times we might try to speak to individuals, and we might try to speak in a different language. So I might be talking about the front desk where we welcome people into the JCC, and I might be talking about how we can gather revenue on that, where the other person in my conversation with them has been talking about membership connection. If I never ever mention the word membership connection or the concept of membership connection, if I never use their language, they will feel that I've never ever listened to them. Now, maybe the language I'm using is quote unquote correct, but if I never actually refer to what they said or I never use their words, they won't feel that I've heard them. And so the whole idea of responding is using the phrases that the other person used, even if somehow you need to maybe change it a little bit, but you still start with their language.
And that's good, Scott. I'm glad you said it. And for me, that isn't always this is what I heard you say. It really is incorporating into your dialogue some of the language that the other individual uses. So sometimes I like to get away from, I think I heard you say,
right,
versus just what's some of the language that they use so that I can connect with them at a better level.
And so some of the other ways you can respond, so once you respond, it's not that the conversation is over. So what are some of the other ways that are very powerful ways to respond in a conversation? One is gathering further information. It's like, please tell me more about that. People like when you're excited about them or their idea. And so when you're asking for more information, that's a very, very powerful connector.
the obvious clarification, understanding people correctly. And summarizing is really important. It really is important to summarize so that we can clarify, and it allows us to connect. And this really, the thing we have to keep thinking about is how all of this allows us to connect and thus build the relationship, because that's what's going to get us better decisions, better supervision, better fundraising, all those strategies we saw up front that really rely on relationship building. This here strategy can help them, because when we use their own words, the most important part about this is people feel heard. And in this day and age, that's really sort of like the golden passport, if you ask me.
Oh, yeah.
It's just nobody feels like anybody's listening to them anymore. And if we can let people know we've heard, and using their words is so important that way, we really gain a lot.
And so how do we kind of sum up the entire HERE strategy? So if you think about it, hesitate, evaluate, attend, respond. And let me just tell you very quickly a couple of different areas where this is being used and how this fits into what you're trying to do. Jan and I had the opportunity to use this program or use this entire model globally within Merrill Lynch, after the HERE model. When we stepped out of Merrill Lynch, we were asked to come back and help them make sure they were connecting with others. And they had data that supported how much more the connections were, usually through profitability. Merrill Lynch does everything through profitability. But they found that the people who used this model connected much better to their clients. We're currently working with another organization, a tech organization, that is actually using it for client service and really connecting. And so within Merrill Lynch, they actually saw a 17% on average growth in profitability from people just using this model. So if you look in here, and this is pulled out from the Tomcat, and if you're thinking 70, 20, 10, and you're thinking of how can either I develop or help others develop, so the 10% formal training, well, you've just kind of gone through it. And so if you took some notes and you see this PowerPoint afterwards and you go, all right, I got to keep this in mind. How do I remind myself to do it? That's part of it. But if you even think of going back to the 20%, who you ask to help? There are many of you that are in conference rooms together. You know, it'd be a great dialogue once you're done this conference call to sit and say, how do we create an environment where people feel they are heard? How do we create a place where the HERE strategy becomes part of how we do a meeting? And so you could have some great dialogue there and do the 20% and even the 70%. Part of that is on the job, even, you know, getting feedback or trying new things. And so if you are the person running a meeting, to assign somebody within that meeting and say, afterwards, I want to talk with you. How did I do? How could I do it better? That's some great on-the-job, quote-unquote, training in the HERE model. And so it seems simple. It is actually simple, but part of it is changing our behavior. Changing our behavior is always difficult. And that happens mostly when we have people who are supporting us in that. And so what we'd like to do is we'd like to open it up to any questions there are.
Fun.
And, you know, seeing what you would like to know from us. Ellen, can you if anybody has questions, just type them in very quickly and we're happy to answer those questions.
We hope you had fun. We had fun.
We had fun.
Anybody have any questions?
We were fabulous.
And while they're typing the questions in, one more thing to let you know that's on here is this resource guide that will be on the end of this PowerPoint has some of the best ideas out there in terms of being both curious or on communication. And there are 9 different TED Talks on listening. And so that is the connection.
I dare anybody to watch all 9.
And that's the connection to them.
Yeah.
Any questions?
No questions have been typed into the group chat.
Yes, that was just really clear.
That's brilliant. All right, so one final thing to remember that we'd love to say, and that is, in this day and age, this skill, above all else, connecting with another person, has become possibly the most powerful skill you can employ professionally and even personally. This model is just a good reminder. Many of you probably do this already, but never had a model behind it before. And now you have a way to think about as you're having the conversation. Because if nothing else, this will set you and your JCC apart from anyone else if you have a place where people feel they are heard.
Amen. Hallelujah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been great. We've really enjoyed that.
Have a
Really
nice
enjoyed it.
rest of the day.
Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
Thanks, Ellen. Thank you, everybody. And we're happy to go up into Canada or anywhere. Chicago. We don't care.
Bye.
Great. Thanks again.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.